okay, I was Pentecostal charismatic and been even in these evangelical circles. Are you going to discount this experience? Well, I had this vision. I had this, miraculous event where I was levitating on a chair and all this stuff. And what do you think about that? What was that real? What was that? And I'm just like, look, I'm not going to judge your experiences and I have no idea. I wasn't there. So I don't have access to that information. But as Orthodox, we're going to have the same assessment of any of these types of revelations, dreams, visions, claims, etc. Yeah, they're possible, but they really don't have that much of an importance or significance for us. And that might sound a little dismissive or based in skepticism, but the reason is that people get so into this and they get so attuned to and fixated on some experience that becomes a huge temptation for prelest, which is spiritual delusion and pride. And I heard a long time ago, I forget who said it, but if you really want to know if a spiritual experience was quote authentic, and remember, you can have a spiritual experience that's real, but that's not from a good spirit. I mean, it can come from you, it can come from a demonic entity, or it could come from God or an angel. Sure, but how are we going to discern this? Well, what are the fruits of it? Did it make you more humble? Did it make you more loving? Or, and this is unfortunately, I think, the indicator of why most of these sort of Pentecostal, charismatic, new agey quote experiences are not of God, is that they do not produce that. They produce arrogant, deluded people. So, discerning of the spirits is a spiritual gift. This is why we have spiritual fathers in the Orthodox Church. We bounce these experiences off of other people as a firewall, as a check, so that we don't go off into, I woke up today and I just felt like God was telling me to go to the grocery store. I went to the grocery store and I prayed really hard in the cracker section. I felt like God was telling me to talk to the homeless dude in the cracker section. And then I felt like God was telling me, it's like that's literally how the charismatics think that the day-to-day process is. Dude, that's not how it is. Right? It's like Father Moses says, God's not like telling you through your feelings every minute of the day to go to the grocery store and talk to this or that homeless person. No, you have divine revelation in scripture and in tradition. You have the liturgy and you have the sacraments. Now use the skills and abilities that God gave you with the freedom that you have to do what you want. That's how it works. But it was an interesting discussion actually to talk to that guy because it reminded me of my charismatic days where I thought, oh yeah, I'm supposed to like wake up and then I pray until I get this sort of feeling or emotion that gives me some impulse that tells me to go down the road and preach the gospel to the people on the street. And that's how I would try to operate. And then you realize it's like that's not really God though. That's my feelings. That's my heart. And if you read Jeremiah, there's a great passage where Jeremiah is talking to the false prophets. And Jeremiah says to the false prophets, you all just prophesy a vision of your own heart and of your own desires. And then I remember thinking, well, that's, when I was like coming out of Protestant evangelical stuff into Catholicism in my early 20s, I remember thinking, this is actually a good question. Like, how would we discern, between good sources of visions and experiences versus bad? And how do we know? Right? Because I have no access to Brian's experience of levitating last year or whatever. But what I do have access to is what Paul lays down when he says in Galatians 1 to judge all of these things by the deposit of faith, right? And that's a safeguard that's very important in Orthodoxy that is not in Protestantism, except for maybe Calvinism. It's not in Rome. They're 100% charismatic. They're the charismatics before the charismatics with all their histrionic, crazy women saints. And it's not in the evangelical charismatic world. So really only this idea exists in Orthodoxy and actually in Catholicism. I mean, Orthodoxy and Calvinism. That's only two places that have this idea of a kind of checks and balance on ecstatic experiences. And that's exactly why Father Seraphim Rose made a huge deal in Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future of warning the people and the masses about the delusion of charismaticism.
I wanted to say that recently, you know, because some of my audios, I was listening to some old Chuck Smith sermons,
Mm-hmm.
and I forgot about how, like when he tells a story about God speaking to him, he tells it like it's a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's how they speak to each. Like that's how those, you know, especially those sermons. But I do know charismatic people who personally, that's what they do. They like walk around and they like talk to themselves.
Yes.
But they think they're talking to God.
Yeah, I did that in my charismatic phase. I thought that's what it meant. Like I was just reading the book of Acts and I'm like, oh, this is the book of Acts. This means that you sit there and you sort of meditate and pray and you wait for God to give you this feeling. And then when you have this feeling, you think, oh, God's telling me to go to the grocery store and telling me to share the gospel with, the checkout person. It's like, that's the mindset of like a charismatic type of person.